Mean Old Lion Media, where black and brown voices truly matter.
Hey guys, this is Russ, and this is the Overlook Podcast. So today we're going to be talking about the disappearance of Monique and Sidney Smith. Monique and Sidney Smith are two biracial sisters who have been missing since May 12, 2000. They disappeared with their mother, Jennifer Lancaster, from Topeka, Kansas. At the time of their disappearance, Sidney was 1 year old and Monique was just over 1 month old. Both girls left with their mother from their home and was never seen or heard from again. It is suspected that they were on their way to a male acquaintance's house, but it's not exactly clear if they ever even made it there. At the time of their disappearance, both girls were living with their mother, Jennifer Lancaster, their 17-year-old aunt, and their grandmother at their grandmother's residence at the Misty Glen Apartments and Townhomes in the 3200 block of Southwest Randolph Avenue. The girls' grandmother saw them with their mother the day they all disappeared. According to the Charlie's Project blog post on the case, she left the apartment around 8 p.m. and was carrying a clear trash bag full of quilts and baby clothes. She told her mother she was taking these to the laundry. However, that was the last time their grandmother saw them. A few days later, Jennifer, the girls' mother's Jeep Wrangler, was found completely emptied in a small parking lot at a different apartment complex, completely abandoned. So let's back this case up a bit. Now, Monique and Sidney, they disappeared with their mother on May 12, 2000 from Topeka, Kansas. But on the day of their disappearance, all three had actually had dinner with their family, and everything seemed fine. I'm talking Monique, Sidney, their mom Jennifer, but also their grandmother and their great-grandfather and their great-grandmother. See, they had all had a family dinner at their great-grandparents' home. And again, everybody reported that things seemed fine. The grandmother had ran into the three again at her home around 8 p.m. that night. Now, when the girls and their mother did not return back home that night, her mother really wasn't initially concerned. She kind of assumed that Jennifer and the girls were probably with her boyfriend. But then she didn't hear from them the next day. And as the time crept into evening, she got concerned and called the police to report all three missing. Now, again, Jennifer's car was found pretty quickly. Depending on what article you read, some say the car was found the very next day. Other articles say the car was found about a week later. This case wasn't very well covered. Most of the articles that I have found on this case were in between 2001 and 2023. However, let's keep in mind, they went missing in 2000. So I'm getting a lot of articles that are mostly 20 years after the fact. So some of the details are a little bit fuzzy. I'm not really sure if the car was found the next day, but it was not connected to Jennifer until a week later, or people simply just got the details wrong. Regardless, the car was found pretty quickly and the car seemed completely abandoned. Now, it was found in an apartment complex just east of California Ave and Southeast 29th Street in Topeka, and the car had absolutely no personal belongings in it. I mean, even the girls' car seats were gone. It was like the car had been purposely cleaned out. Now, the police, they did contact a couple people in Jennifer's life. They contacted Sidney's father, but he claimed he had not heard from the mother or seen the girls. Friends stated pretty much the same thing. And honestly, because the mother was of legal age and there was no sign of violence, there was a possibility that she could have just walked away from her life. And police told her mother that it was perfectly legal for her to choose to go missing on her own accord. And some people believe she did just that. See, once Jennifer disappeared, her mother was able to connect some dots together that she didn't really notice before the disappearance. For example, Jennifer's cell phone was on her mother's phone plan. When she disappeared, her mother began to look through her phone records, and she found that Jennifer had actually made not a single phone call from her phone the entire week of her disappearance. She also left the phone at home. And another odd thing was that I remember the grandmother saw the mother and the girls 8 p.m. the night they disappeared. The mother was taking that trash bag full of quilts and baby clothes to be washed. Now, the mother remembered this and was like, you know what? And that is weird because they had a washer and dryer at home. And then the mother went home and noticed that other things from the home belonging to Jennifer and the girls were also gone. The mother realized it seemed like maybe her daughter had been taking things out the home little by little the week before. Now, I just want to clarify because I've seen a couple comments on this where people are saying, how wouldn't you have noticed that? But it should be noted that, one, Jennifer and the girls lived in the basement of the home, so they were in a different area than the rest of the family. But also, the family had just moved in a few weeks prior. They were new to this home, so there were still boxes everywhere. So honestly, if you weren't really paying particularly close attention, you probably wouldn't have noticed that more items were missing from their area than usual. And then again, there's that Jeep. Her Jeep was found, and it was found completely cleaned out. The girls' car seats weren't even in there. It was like someone intentionally cleaned it. Now, her mother has went on to say that she now thinks her daughter took special steps to keep people from knowing she was about to leave. And here's the thing, Jennifer actually did have money in her checking account. It's said to be very little, but that account was never touched again. In fact, she didn't even pick up her last check from the bar that she worked at. But it should be noticed while the car was abandoned, the keys were not left. And it appears as if Jennifer took at least her driver's license with her. She had no credit cards or anything like that in her name, so they weren't able to trace that as she had none. Now, going back to Monique and Sidney, there's really not a lot about them on the net, which honestly we shouldn't be surprised at because they were so young. You really just find things like their weight, their name, their birthdays, and baby pictures. And later on, we get some sketches showing what they may look like now or may have looked like in their teen years. That's it. But we do have a little bit of information on their mother. And this wasn't always the case. When this case first happened, again, we're talking the early 2000s, and this is really before the explosion of social media. MySpace wasn't popping yet, y'all. There was no Facebook. There definitely wasn't an Instagram. And so there's not those things that we can kind of go back and look through and see if she had any connections with this person or that person, or even a way to really spread the news about her missing. There was a couple articles here and there, but they were so bare and had no detail. In fact, one of the things I noticed is that when I looked up this case on places like Reddit and Web Sleuths and things like that, most of the threads were filled with people saying, why isn't there any information? But again, most of those threads were started about 8 years ago or 4 years ago. And a lot of the articles I use now were just printed. Now, going back to their mother, what we do find out about their mother is that she was young. Jennifer herself was only 20 years old at the time that they disappeared. In a couple articles, her mother stated that, she got in with the wrong crowd while in high school and got in a little bit of trouble while she was in school. She had Sidney around age 18 or 19 and then had Monique the following year. At the time of her disappearance, she was working at a bar called Remington's and an adult club called Baby Dolls, though her mom has pointed out she had only been working at Baby Dolls for a couple of days before she disappeared. Now, Jennifer did have some distinguishing marks such as a pierced right eyebrow. She had a tongue piercing and double pierced ears. She had a tattoo of the words "Low Rider" on her left upper arm in green and black, and a tattoo design on her lower back also in green and black. However, we have no details about what that tattoo was. Her mother described her as a kind person who was just young and may have went through some troubles around that time, but was not a bad person at all. She was just young. Now, a few weeks after the trio disappeared, a Steak and Shake in St. Louis, Missouri sent some mail thanking Jennifer, the girl's mother, for filling out a comment card on the food and service provided. In this envelope, they also sent her a couple of coupons. Her mother immediately contacted the company asking if they could send the card filled out by the person named Jennifer Lancaster, as she wanted to compare the handwriting to see if this was actually filled out by her daughter. But unfortunately, the comment card had already been destroyed. And as far as we know, there has been no substantial sightings of Sidney, Monique, or Jennifer. And there's no evidence of foul play. There were some small tips that came throughout the years, but there were things that were little and that could not be confirmed. In the very same year that they disappeared, that August, a truck driver thought that he may have given a ride to Jennifer, as he had picked up a hitchhiker that looked like her, but he says she was alone. He had saw her picture on one of the hundreds of flyers that had been posted around at different restaurants and truck stops in Kansas. There was another reported sighting of a woman who people thought could be Jennifer. They actually seen her at the Brookwood shopping center that was actually not too far away from where Jennifer and the girls live. But this woman was actually tracked down and it was not Jennifer. And again, like with both sightings, it's only reported that they see this woman and not a blonde white woman with two biracial children with her at all. Detective Terry Harris told the Capital Journal, and I quote, "She appears to be a conscientious mother who wouldn't do anything to harm her children." But with that said, it's been 23 years and their grandmother, Vicki Lancaster, still does not know what happened to her daughter or her grandchildren. Over the years, Vicki, their grandmother, and Jennifer's mother has hoped that some type of blimp on the radar would show that the trio is at least okay. They had social security numbers, and she was hoping that maybe when the girls became old enough that they would enroll the girls in school and it would at least pop up and she would know, okay, they're alive, they're well, but it hasn't happened. Now, the Doe Network did contact the grandmother at some point and asked her to provide DNA to be compared to the sample of an unidentified woman in another state, and that they will contact the police if the DNA matched. However, she said she never heard back anything about this afterwards. And in a CJ Online article, it's reported that authorities have done extensive searches of nationwide databases to see if the girls or their mother or anything shows up that might possibly match them, but nothing has shown up as of yet. In a thecrimewire.com article titled "Jennifer Lancaster and Her Two Children Missing 20 Plus Years," they read about the girls' grandmother, Vicki, hoping that maybe their mother just met a good man who adopted the girls and they are all off living a new life. But she knows that there are also harsher alternatives that could have happened. And while the grandmother knows that, like the police said, she could have just walked away, started a new life, and that's definitely a possibility, she struggles to understand why her daughter still would not have reached out after all these years. At least to let them know, hey, I'm okay, even if she didn't want to say where she was. Especially given the fact that the girl's mother, Jennifer, was particularly close to her maternal grandfather. I mean, she was there by his side, taking him to doctor visits and so forth when he was fighting bladder cancer. But she didn't reach out to him. He passed away in 2009, still wishing to know where his granddaughter and great-granddaughters were. Currently, the girls, Monique and Sidney, both have profiles with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. However, the information is bare. There are pictures of both of them as babies and sketch photos of what they might look like as teens or possibly young adults, but they were so young when they disappeared that It's really hard to say if those sketches would look anything like what they may look like today. Sometimes we see these sketches and people are found and, oh my gosh, they look exactly like the sketch. Other times you see the sketches and you're like, yeah, I would have never saw them, looked at this picture and thought anything about connecting the two. In an article posted in April 2023 by CJOnline.com titled, "After Daughter and Babies Disappeared 23 Years Ago, Vicki Lancaster Still Doesn't Know What Happened," the grandmother is quoted as saying, "I don't know any more now than I did then," in regards to the trio's disappearance. She actually said with the Capital Journal to do the interview on the day of Monique's 23rd birthday. She's quoted as saying, "I want people to know that I really do care. All of their family cares. We just like to know if they are okay." She went on to talk about how over the years she's thought of every possible scenario that could have happened. She wonders, what vehicle did they enter to after they abandoned that Jeep? She wonders if the granddaughters ended up being raised by someone completely different than Jennifer. And maybe they don't even know who their birth mother is, considering, again, both girls were so young when they vanished. But she doesn't know. She's hoping that one day she will find out the answers to all of her questions. Now, with this case, there's actually quite a bit of theories, and I was very surprised considering how long the case went without really much information online about it. So the first theory that you'll hear about when you go to some of the crime-sleuthing websites is, who is his boyfriend or male acquaintance that they were going to visit the night they disappeared, or who the grandmother thought that they were with? Now, as I gave you the details, that's something I mentioned kind of briefly, and then we get all this other information, and the boyfriend or the male acquaintance angle is not really touched on. But the reason why this theory pops up a lot over the web is because, one, again, up until 2000, there really wasn't a lot of articles available online on this case. And the ones that were very, very bare. Like, I'm talking maybe a paragraph and a half. It was not a lot of info. And so what a lot of people got to read when they were writing comments on this case 8 years ago, 4 years ago, what they were reading was basically, woman, 2 kids disappear, thought they were with boyfriend or on their way to see male acquaintance. Have you seen them? And we all know what kind of comes to our mind, unfortunately, when we hear that a woman disappeared and she was on her way to see a male. Unfortunately, statistics show us that, yeah, let's check out that male. That doesn't sound great. Who is he? Where has he been? But this is a case where we really don't get a lot of details. A lot of the newer articles mentioned that the children's father was checked out. He had not seen or heard from them, and that police pretty much bought it and didn't see any way to connect them. And I also came across some articles that say that they never made it to the male acquaintance house, but it really doesn't go into any more detail. We have the grandmother who's done interviews, and she doesn't seem to indicate she is suspicious of the boyfriend or the children's father whatsoever. But again, we don't have a lot of detail. This is a theory I think the internet is just kind of going on a hunch with because of how cases like this have ended in the past. And also, again, most of these comments were made before additional information became available to the public. The next theory that you might see every now and then is that the girls and their mother might have been victims to some sort of trafficking. And this is just going off the fact that they're all females and they went missing, and they went missing without a trace. Vicki was very young. She was only 20 around the time she disappeared, and the girls were also very young. Vicki was working at an adult bar at the time she disappeared. And so I think people just kind of connect those things, and that is where that theory comes from. You don't really see people going into details about this, so it just seems like they are gathering some connections. That's really all we get about that. Now, the next theory we come across, which I find particularly interesting, were the trio a victim of John Edward Robinson. Now, I don't want to get too into details about John Edward Robinson because, one, I just don't really care about going into details about serial killers. I don't find them fascinating. I don't think they're interesting. I don't think they deserve TV shows or movies made about them in their life. Even on the level of a therapist, I do not find the way that their brains work particularly fascinating or interesting in the least, if I'm being 100% honest. I really wish that we had more stuff that focused on the victims and on their lives. But I am going to get into some details about him so you can understand where this theory comes from and where people are kind of going with this. So John Edward Robertson is really one of the first known serial killers that we know about that really used the internet to lure his victim. See, he used virtual chat rooms to find women and lure them. He would do all sorts of things. He was a con man, he was a fraud, he was a murderer as well. He was someone who was generally sadistic. He had the stereotypical look of a lot of these serial killers. He looked like someone's boring uncle who wanted to sell you car insurance or something of that matter. Now, what we know about him is that he would do things like create shell companies and these fake personas and use them to attract vulnerable women who he would then promise like some type of high-paying job or companionship to. He would lure them to his hometown and then he would isolate them, exploit them, and then kill them. These women's family would often report them missing, and sometimes they would be told by police, at least initially, that, hey, these women are grown and they can disappear on their own will, as was the case with his victim, Paula Godfrey. He would also lure young mothers with his fake nonprofit called the Kansas City Outreach Program with promises to help them and help their babies. But what he was actually doing was getting them to sign over the rights of their children, where he would basically sell these babies in this adoption scheme, as was the case with his victim, Lisa Stasi. Now, to this day, police believe that there were more victims that they just don't know about. And again, he was doing all this in Kansas, where Sidney, Monique, and their mother, Jennifer, all disappeared from. Eventually, he was arrested in jail for about 6 years on financial crimes. But even while he was in jail, he had access to a computer and was still messaging and reaching out to women while in jail. Now, he eventually got out, and when he got out, he did what people like him do, which is continue to wreak havoc on the community around him. On June 2nd of 2000, he was arrested for sexual battery and a theft. And while police had him, they were able to connect him to the disappearance of multiple other women. The police were able to get a search warrant for his properties, and they found 2 85-pound drums that contained the decomposing bodies of 2 women who were later identified as Isabella Loica and Suzette Truton. They would go on to find the bodies of 3 more women in storage units that belonged to him. So you see how someone might have connected Sidney, Monique, and Jennifer's disappearance to him. He was a man out here scamming young women for devious reasons. And not only that, he was specifically looked out for young mothers, scamming them out of their rights to their children, to selling off their children. Now, I saw no official articles or police reports or anything like that connecting him to Sidney or Monique or their mother at all. Also, keep in mind, he was arrested just a couple weeks after the girls went missing, but a couple weeks is still enough time to be devious and do devious things. But as far as I know, he has not been connected to this case officially at all. Another thing to keep in mind is also that if they were connected, it still would be kind of odd that Jennifer seemed to have taken certain steps to not let the family know what she was doing and what she was connected into. Because let's say he did reach out to her and he was going to help her with the kids. Why wouldn't she inform anybody of that? If someone had reached out with this great job opportunity, also she's in a nearby city, she could have left the kids with her mother as she checked out this opportunity. It just seems kind of suspicious that she disappeared, and it seems like she made a concentrated effort to let no one know she disappeared, and it may have been planned out, seeing as she didn't even use her phone that last week before she left. And again, the car seemingly completely cleaned out. Now, is it possible that he has said, hey, I can help you, get your kids adopted out. You can live the life of a young woman? Possibly. But again, we have nothing that clearly indicates that or directly ties the two together. Now, another theory that's somewhat related a little bit. I did come across one blog post where they wondered if Jennifer, the girl's mother, was lured to her death by someone that wanted her children. They didn't get into a lot of details about this, but I also saw some other people mention something around these lines and other websites. And no one really gets into details, but as you saw from the case I covered 2 weeks ago, people kidnapping children to raise as their own is definitely a thing. Now, usually it's brand newborns, which Monique was. She was only about 5 weeks old at the time of the disappearance. And a child being 1-year-old kidnapped to be raised as their own is not completely unheard of, but less likely. But it definitely could have been a 2-for-1 situation for somebody. However, again, this is one of those speculations that come about without us actually having evidence from the case that at least we, the public, know that would directly tie into this. Now, the last theory I saw discussed in detail around the net was there a chance that Sidney, Monique, and their mother were placed into witness protection? And this is an interesting one because this is something I actually come across quite a bit when it comes to a lot of these cases. There's actually a belief that people are placed into witness protection a lot when it comes to missing people, especially cases that just baffle people, where there seems to be a lot of details, but none of the details actually line up with a conclusion. People tend to automatically go to witness protection. Now, I don't usually bring up witness protection in my theories just because, again, it's one of those wild card theories that you've seen thrown at a lot of cases without any direct correlation. However, because of the way that Sidney, Monique, and their mother, Jennifer, left, I think this one might actually be somewhat fitting. Because here's the thing. If they were in the witness protection program, they would not have told the family. I think I'm really unclear about it because the U.S. government really doesn't like to tell us a lot about the witness protection program, which is, fair. I respect it. So I'm really not 100% sure. I did some digging online and, that didn't help me that much more, if I'm being honest with you guys. I went through a couple of .gov websites, like the Department of Justice websites. I went through the U.S. Marshal website. I went through justice.gov website and read a couple articles. And to be honest with y'all, the articles really told me to mind my business. Like, that's essentially what I got. I mean, it gives detail, but they don't give any details about, like, hey, if the person's family happens to file a missing persons case, what happens? Like, they weren't answering those questions. They're like, Russ, that's above your pay grade. And I thoroughly respect that. However, it does not answer any of our questions about this theory. Now, one thing I will say is that, of course, we're talking witness protection, is that this protection is generally given to people that are going to testify against major criminal organizations or their members. And as far as we know, Jennifer never testified against any major organization. She wasn't involved in any legal proceedings or anything like that. I have actually looked into cases where there also seems to be a very likely chance the person was put in witness protection. And these are individuals, like in the news articles, it says, like, oh, they were a witness in court, they're involved in this, they have been previously questioned about, this organization, blah, blah, blah. Like, articles kind of let you know but as far as I can tell, there's nothing that says anything about her being involved in any type of court case at all, because the whole purpose of witness protection is providing protection against somebody that can give the government something in exchange. Like, don't get me wrong, y'all, go USA, rah, 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 side eye. We don't need to get into that. But also, this is the USA. They not just protecting you because they're good citizens at heart and they care about our general well-being. No, if they're protecting you, it's from some type of trade-off. And that trade-off is, there's these people on the street doing these big illegal things that we cannot tax, that they're making money off of, and we just aren't cool with that. And other ventures, and I'm sure people are getting harmed or whatever, and we need you to help us take them down. So in order for us to do that, we'll provide you protection. They aren't really just offering protection unless you can also give them something. And as far as we know, there's no mention of her being involved in any crime, connected to any gangs or any organizations or anything like that. There's not even a whisper of it. Now, does that mean there's a chance that she saw something and we just don't know? For sure. I mean, that would be the ideal way that witness protection works, is that the general population doesn't even know what this person may have saw, been involved with, blah, blah, blah. However, I'm just not 100% sure how likely it is that we would hear nothing about her being involved in a case or a court hearing or anything whatsoever. Again, I looked up a couple articles on how witness protection works, and it's just really not clear. Also, I want to point out that thousands of people are reported missing in the U.S. every year. And according to the usmarshals.gov website, the witness protection program has only successfully protected about 19,000 participants since the beginning of the program in 1971. So it can't be as many people as we think going into this program. Now, with that said, if she is in a witness protection program, we have no way of knowing. They don't tell us, which is, great for them. But unfortunately, we just simply would not know. However, I did come across one sleuther's comment, which I will say they did get from Wikipedia, and, anybody can write anything in there. But they detail kind of what kind of goes on in the witness protection program. And one of the things they say is that, of course, witnesses are not allowed to get in contact with old connections, not even family members. But they also talk about how witnesses have to adhere to an extremely convoluted and indirect transportation path before reaching their final distant location. And they describe this as like transit, often involving a long seeming chain of random flights and change off of cars and things such as that, to make sure that if they're being followed, it's hard for them to really figure out where they're going, where the final destination is. And that might correlate with her abandoning her car completely cleaned out, even taking along the car seats. But again, this is one that might be a far stretch. But that is all the theories that I've came across when it comes to the disappearance of Sidney and Monique Smith and their mother, Jennifer Lancaster. It has been 23 years and their family is still wondering where they are. And even if they can't know where they are, they just want to know, are they okay? Are you alive? And people are really concerned because, again, it's been 23 years and there has not been so much of a blimp of 3 whole people that disappeared at once. And it's very hard for one person, let alone 3, to remain missing this long, and no one has been able to provide any type of evidence of them being seen or any type of evidence of them showing up anywhere, even just for a second in all this time. I ask if you have any information about the disappearance of Sidney and Monique Smith or their mother, Jennifer Lancaster, that you reach out to the Topeka Criminal Investigation Bureau at 785-368-9400, or you can make anonymous tips can also be made online at www.p3tips.com/128. Again, Thank you guys for listening. You can head over to the Instagram and check out pictures of Sidney, Monique, their mother, and the sketches of what they may or may not look like today on my Instagram, which is _podcast. I thank you guys for listening. I thank you guys for sharing the podcast and sharing these people's flyers and sharing information about them and trying to help get them home to their loved ones. As always, I ask that you guys stay safe, stay vigilant, and I'll have a new episode for you guys in 2 weeks. Thanks. Bye.
Mean Old Lion Media, where Black and brown voices truly matter.